What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Kristy Ingram. As a former competitive equestrian in her native Australia, Kristy had to learn how to make the transition from managing horses to managing people when her competitive days ended. Her 15 years of consulting experience includes managing Ernst & Young's sponsorship of the Rio Olympics and developing their women's athletes business network. Today, she is EY's global leader of athlete programs, where she helps talent-hungry managers tap into a leadership pipeline that most overlook: retired athletes.
Hi, so-and-so, who are you? I'm a swimmer. I'm a pole vaulter. All athletes I've spoken to, when they're in the middle of competition, the first descriptor they use is the athlete. Descriptor is part of their identity. It's a loss when that goes away. And sometimes that's not by choice. It should still be there. It is still part of who you are and what you bring. But here is how you can speak a slightly different language in the corporate world to translate what amazing things you bring to the table.
Kristy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Don. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation.
Well, I have loved learning more about you in the prep work to be with you today. I know you grew up in Australia and you were an equestrian.
Yes.
We haven't had an equestrian on the Corporate Competitor Podcast. You're going to teach us things today we have not known. Tell me about those early days, falling in love with horses and what you learned about the ability to work together.
There was something about equestrian that really got me from a very early age. I think it's a level of having to be in tune with something that can't really talk back to you. Sport is so much about competition, whether it's with your teammates or your coaches, but communication is kind of one way with a horse. The specific details around dressage is very particular sort of sport. You have to be in motion with the horse. There's really not a lot of room for error. And I like that attention to detail. And I did dressage, but anyone who has had anything to do with horses, once you've had a relationship with a horse or any animal that you have in your house, there is certainly a deep love there, a reliance that they have on you and a true partnership that you have to form in order to compete or to do anything. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I think that really goes for anything when it comes to equestrian. It's truly a team sport. I know it's listed as individual in most instances, but you're sure not going too far if the horse doesn't want to go. So being able to have that partnership and be able to encourage them and give them that sense of comfort. They're a flight animal, so certainly attracted me to that. And I'm a very detail-oriented person, so the sport sure suited me well from a personality standpoint.
I had never quite thought about that connection of lessons that you've learned leading people through learning how to lead horses.
Yeah.
What did you learn about leading people from learning how to get this object that can't technically talk back to you to go to water and drink?
And is so much larger than you as well. So you have to lead by example. And it's the same whether you're managing a team in your workplace or whether it's in sport. You need to lead by example with the hope and sort of putting the safety net around everyone that they will be able to follow, to show that the playing field really isn't scary and that you're able to accomplish these amazing things. Forcing, mandating, all of those sorts of words are just not a part of the vocabulary when it comes to equestrian. It's encouragement and setting an example.
And those are probably things you've been able to execute on as a leader of non-equine.
Yeah. Going back to my two-legged friends.
Um, exactly.
Absolutely. I think teaming is so much about collaboration, and it's not one person leading and everyone else following. It's one person maybe half a step in front setting the vision, but everyone needs to believe in that, including the horses,
Yeah.
in order to get over that finish line.
I love it. I also saw this in 2019, 42% of US high school athletes were young women, right? Were girls.
Mhm.
But in Australia, that number is 55%. So actually, among athletes at a younger age, women outnumber men in Australia. What is it about the culture of the country that inspires or excites women into athletics?
It's a little bit the same in the US, but we have just sport in our general vision so much, whether it's the Olympics or cricket on TV or whatever sport it might be. I mean, growing up in Australia, we're so fortunate to have access to sport just as a part of life. The weather is very conducive. There's a level of encouragement during our formative years in school where we are just sort of told to take a chance, give it a shot. I mean, our school system allows us to really try out a whole bunch of different sports. I tried 10-pin bowling and squash and fencing through high school. Like, they really gave us a great selection of what to try out, and whatever interested you on any given day, you could really give it a shot. And the structure around school sports is maybe a step in front of where it is in the US, but I really do think that us Aussies just love sport from such a young age. It helps when it's, not snowing outside all the time.
That's true. I will tell you, cricket, I still can't get. So today at Ernst& Young, you're the global leader for athlete programs, and you love the role because you said that competition taught you resilience, confidence, and unwavering focus. I love that. Can you name a time in competition where one or all three of those really came into play in helping you hold things together?
Oh, goodness. I have so many examples. I've lost count of how many times I've fallen off a horse. From a competition standpoint, when you have a fall, it's not an automatic disqualification. So you do have a chance to get back on, to gather your thoughts, and to have to proceed. You're obviously rattled, the horse might be rattled, and the ability to really quickly collect yourself and keep going is really important in order to cross the finish line with any hope of placing or even just being able to complete the competition. So,
Get back on your horse.
yeah, getting back on the horse. When I was doing some cross country jumping, which is sort of out in the backfields, you're sort of jumping over logs and through rivers. There's birds or other animals running around the field. So things happen. There are many occasions where I've ended up on the other side of a fence with the horse staring at me, going, "Why is this going on?" It happens more often than I would like to admit, but honestly, is part of what we learn in the sport as well, is get straight back on, settle yourself down, make sure the horse understands that this isn't the end of the world, keep going.
Has there been a moment in this amazing career you've had so far where something just fell flat and you had to dust off, figure it out, move forward quickly? There's not time to pout. Translate that into business for us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I started my journey at EY in the consulting side of the business. So I had a lot of client relationships and was working a lot in change management, organizational design. As you're taking options back to the client, they want to make a big change. Your hope is you're reading the room, right? And you're putting something on paper and taking it into the meeting that really sits well with them. They believe it, it aligns with their culture. That's not always the case, as external consultants can surely attest to. So there is always a chance to kind of buck up with having a meeting maybe not going to plan. or as a leader, having to also guide your team through that. Not the end of the world. We can refocus, we can reshape it. We got great feedback. That's a really good thing for us. And let's go back to the client with something that is certainly more on point for them.
When you make that presentation and no one in the room speaks up, that's never fun.
I know.
We've all been there.
Silence is terrifying. But to be really honest, I've learned over the years, mainly through my own experience, I'm an introvert, that sometimes silence allows for the quieter people in the room to have space to speak as well. So there's a fine balance between good silence that allows some contemplation and then some feedback, and then just the dead silence where you can read on their faces that it's just not what they were expecting.
I love it. So give me the highlight. What was the greatest moment in your writing career?
I call it my greatest, probably because it was the most surprising. And it was my first year riding Anatole. We were at the state championships and we were sort of just finding our feet. And I didn't have any huge expectations of placing. They used to write the scores in pencil and sort of post it on the window of one of the rooms. And so you'd go up to see how you did. And seeing that I'd placed third, my jaw hit the ground because it was just so far out of my expectation to place that high. And it was in the days before social media. So there's not a lot of photos out there, but I still to this day remember where I was standing, what I was wearing. So I would say that,
That's pretty awesome.
yeah.
Other than Anatole,
Mhm.
who was the greatest influence on your sports journey as you were growing up?
I mean, it's got to be family, right? So many young athletes would say the same, that they wouldn't be where they are, whether it's a hobbyist or whether they're going to the Olympic trials, as is happening in so many countries this week. You need your family.
Ah,
It really takes a village, and you can't get to whether it's the early morning swim practices or get down to the stables or wherever it is without your poor mum or dad driving you at some ungodly hour of the morning. Certainly, it would have to be family. And apart from that, I've been very lucky to have mentors throughout the sport and meet some of the Olympic team from Atlanta and Sydney. Obviously, you've got your in sport mentors, but it's really the people around you, family and friends, that allow you to give up the social hours and the sleep and the weekends.
and that is the thing I think that so many people miss, especially with athletics. If you weren't a participant at some level and at some time, you watch the games, right? The event,
Mhm.
and you're thinking, oh, that's awesome. But what you
Yeah.
don't realize is that there's a 10x or more in prep time to get ready for that ride.
Oh, 100%. And it's not all the Instagram moments or the highlights on the sports channels. There is so much blood, sweat, and tears,
Yeah.
a lot of tears
Yeah.
that goes in behind the scenes. That's for sure. The Olympians that I work closely with, you have all attested to this. You miss birthdays or anniversaries or significant events, sometimes Christmas, to be able to pursue this really weird and wonderful dream that you have.
That is. And when you can find those people who are willing to do all of those things, you're finding the unicorn.
Oh, you really are, without a doubt.
So, in your career professionally, you've moved several times: Australia, Canada, UK. I mean, you're not moving from one block to the next.
No.
But once you've joined an organization and you're in an all new environment, what are some of the things you're doing to actually get to know the team that you're joining? What are some of the ways that people who jump into the unknown like you navigate?
It was really hard for me to find that space, to find that voice. Earlier on in my career, and even as I joined EY 10 years ago, actually, all these people around me had so much more experience, and I was coming into this job with no real consulting experience, industry experience, yes, but no real business consulting experience. And I was so intimidated by that. And that's where I just clam up and I'll take great notes and talk to people offline. But I think not being afraid to bring your authentic self, whether it's the office or the virtual environment that we're all working in at the moment, it opens a lot of people up to feeling confident, to have conversations that are beyond, hey, what's the status report? Where are we on the budget, etc. Being able to talk a little bit about what you do outside of work or the things that make you passionate, things that you'd like to experience at the office that are outside your job description. There's a level of courage that it takes. And if you create that safe space, people open up and you just build those relationships. Going beyond your network, I mean, cold emailing or cold calling people in your organization, obviously appropriately, to just reach out and say, hi, I'm really fascinated with what you're doing. Here is a little bit about me. Can we connect?
Wow.
To be honest, I wouldn't be in New York if I hadn't done that with Beth Brooke, who you've had on this podcast. That's
Oh,
how I've ended up with this role. Random email one evening to Beth to say, I love what you're doing. Can we talk? I guess nearly 8 years later, here we are.
I love it. Beth was in episode 28, which is crazy. It's that long ago. One of my absolute favorites because she was willing to kind of dig in and try all kinds of different things.
Yeah. And share her story.
Oh,
It was a great podcast because her story is, she tells it so authentically and without glossing over the tough parts. That's really important.
right.
And it's taken a couple of amazing leaders within EY to sort of recognize that when I was talking to them offline, obviously I had some ideas that they liked, and they started creating some space for me and actually sort of throwing questions to me,
Uh,
increase my comfort level. And it's certainly, I still have my moments, but very much these days, it's a learned behavior that I sort of need to switch on and off depending on the circumstance that I'm in. And, I have these little pep talks with myself before some meetings to be like, okay, your voice needs to be heard today. This is in your wheelhouse. You've got some really interesting things to share and to add to the conversation. So whether you like it or not, you've got to talk.
give yourself a pep talk. I love it.
Oh, very much so.
So you referenced joining EY 2011.
Yeah.
The company has been on the best places to work list for 2 decades. Crazy, right?
It is crazy.
I know what the structure is, but what does it take to create a best place to work?
That is a really interesting question. You've got your standard, right? Whether it's compensation or benefits or things outside of work that bring you closer together as a firm. Looking at EY compared to the other places I've worked, the ability to really foster an entrepreneurial spirit and to really encourage our people to own their career and giving them the flexibility to pursue really what they are passionate about. And purpose is obviously very much core to our business structure. And I see it every day with the teams that I work in. This role that I'm in is testament to that. It was off the side of our desk for many, many years, but continue to have the conversations and say, look, I think this is really important. This is certainly something that I would like to pursue. And they've allowed me and the wonderful people that support the athlete programs here to kind of build our own little mini business within the firm. And I've seen so many examples of that throughout the years at EY. So the flexibility to drive your own career and the encouragement and expectation that you do drive your own career is certainly something that I very much value being at EY.
I know that in many organizations, we try to support certain groups of people that have something that bonds them together. In your case, it's athletics. What kind of support are you and EY offering those who have that athletic background?
There's a couple of different streams that we really look at. One is the research. It's really critical to have those insights out there. And surprisingly, to myself, we're one of the first that have really dug into this kind of topic. So it's very important to have that sort of business case and those numbers behind us. We have also featured many athletes in terms of our social media, just getting the stories out there and having athletes have a place to come together is really important as well. We run a mentoring program. Gosh, I think it's in its 6th year now for women athletes and athletes that fit EY and are interested in pursuing a career within EY. And then we look at hiring programs as well.
How many employees work at EY?
300,000, I think we've tipped over.
300,000.
Yeah, it's a small nation.
Yeah, it is. So, do you have any sense through your efforts what number of those 300,000 actually have athletics in their background?
So, I mean, our research and, I am so basically no. Is the easy answer when we can't put an exact number on it. We haven't been able to track it right now. So it's a very grassroots initiative in finding these athletes, but we have hundreds that come out of the woodwork. I'm on calls literally nearly every week with someone different who has either found us or completely unrelated to the athlete programs. And they're like, oh, I've competed in 7 Ironman triathlons. Does that qualify me for this group? I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, yep, that's a yes from me. So we have a good 300 on our radar at the moment and finding more by the day.
We'll be back after this.
Your business phone service should not be complicated to set up, manage, and use. Nextiva connects your phone system with business apps, AI, and automation on a single platform to run your business. With their easy to use dashboard, you will be able to connect with your team and customers all in one place. Nextiva, powering communication across the Pac 12 and now the Corporate Competitor Podcast.
Welcome back to Corporate Competitor Podcast. This program that you're part of, I am so fascinated by it. And it's so great that you all have done so many good things here because it's the very reason we're actually on this podcast.
Yeah.
Those who listen to this podcast know that, it's a part of our intro every week.
It is.
Your work and the work of EY, along with the ESPNW, 94% of women in the C-suite played sports. It's so cool to have you here today because you were part of the research. I asked Beth Brooke, you referenced Beth, did the results shock you?
I mean, yes, a resounding yes. We all had an inkling that it was going to be high just from the conversations that you have with women leaders at that C-suite level. Sport was definitely a topic of conversation that came up more often than not, but I don't think any of us were expecting 94% to come back.
That's such a crazy number.
And the research we've done subsequently to that has only kind of verified.
Yep.
And obviously, the start of your podcast starts with this in terms of the women leaders, 94% of them having sport in their background. So thank you so much on our behalf for giving these topics airtime as well. I think it's really important to continue to uncover these little gems and talk about how we're able to drive the conversation forward. And you've been a really big part of that with this podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, it all began when I saw a little clip in ESPN about the research, and I thought that number can't be real. And then as I grew to understand it, I thought, well, if that's true, I want to then talk to folks who are not the number, but the living, breathing soul that made up the number.
Absolutely.
When you're pairing these athletes in your program with mentors, what are some of the challenges that they're being mentored through?
To be really honest, it's such a wide sweeping set of skill sets and backgrounds that we have in these athletes. We've purposefully kept the program quite broad because athletes want to go into many different things after they leave their field of sport, whether they want to stay in sport, start their own business, whether they have qualifications and want to pursue sort of a more corporate professional career. Honestly, it's really helping them figure out what is that next step. And I'm not necessarily talking about career coaching as in I don't know what I want to do, but it's I have an idea and I don't know how to execute. How do we help them articulate it and figure out what that plan is, and pairing them with amazing mentors, both from inside EY and previously to that with the International Women's Forum as well, have been just amazing at shedding light on what that pathway can look like.
And in doing that, not all of these athletes end up at EY, right?
No.
So you're actually preparing them for the world at large through your experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to hire them all if they're interested and suited, because honestly, we've had I think nearly 130 come through the program over the 6 years, and they all have incredible stories. And, I'm very fortunate to stay in touch with most of them. It's a very inspiring group of people, but really the concept is what's next. And whether it's maybe biomechanical engineering or starting your own apparel company, that's sort of irrelevant, because having more successful athletes in the workforce, including entrepreneurs, only serves the business community in a positive way.
Totally. So you've described an athlete's transition into the workforce to be difficult because, and I love this phrase, you said they lose their descriptor. Can you share what you mean by that? And what kind of counseling do you give people that are challenged with that sudden loss of whatever they used to be?
Certainly the theme amongst all athletes I've spoken to, when they're in the middle of competition within their athletic career, you ask them, "Hi, so and so, who are you?" And they're like, "I'm a swimmer, I'm a pole vaulter." You end up going into other things, but the first descriptor they use is the athlete descriptor, and it's a loss when that goes away. And sometimes that's not by choice, whether it's not qualifying or an injury or just life events take you off the field sooner than you would like. Losing that descriptor is part of their identity. In a way, it's teaching them a new language that hasn't gone away. It should still be there. It is still part of who you are and what you bring to the table. But here is how you can speak a slightly different language in the corporate world to translate what you've done, what your skills are, and what amazing things you bring to the table.
Coach me, Kristy. So tell me, because I will tell you, I went through this when I retired from Sports Illustrated. My identity was caught up in not just what I did, but who I did it for.
Yeah,
And suddenly I didn't have that. It was a challenge.
it is.
Coach me.
I think it's finding, where is your purpose? What was it about sport that you enjoyed? Was it the team environment? Was it high performance? What do you do outside of sport? What eases your mind on those days that you need to have a recovery day? And starting the conversation with what makes you happy and what gets you energized is a really important place to start. And then honestly, sort of explaining what that looks like in the corporate world is sometimes an interesting conversation, because it is a different language for them.
Mm.
Most of the athletes we've hired don't have any corporate experience. Allowing them to understand that you don't need to entirely leave it behind, that you can bring this to the workplace and you can talk about it with clients and your teams and bring these really interesting insights that the rest of the team doesn't have to the table, but giving them maybe some different words to use.
I love your use of the word language when you describe it, because language is translatable.
Yes.
We say a word and it can turn out here meaning something else. So teaching them what the words are in athletics that they might have used that come on up over here on the business side.
Without a doubt.
Wow. One of the discussions we have often is about, you learn to run a huddle in sports.
Yeah,
It's like running a meeting in business.
absolutely is.
It's just a matter of, again, it's languaging.
It is. And the team aspect there as well. You build a team in your sport, whether it's an individual sport or you're playing soccer, you need to have the right people in the right places to win the game. And that's just as true in the business world. You need people who have a certain set of skills that complement each other, put everybody in the place that they're the strongest, and you come out on top.
One of the fun things you said there a second ago, you talk about individual sports. So we've had a couple of golfers on,
Yep,
Jack Nicklaus and Bubba Watson, and those are the epitome of individual sports.
absolutely.
But the truth is, as they talked about what it took to truly become best in class, it's a team.
Oh, it is.
Begins with that mom that drives them to the golf range at 5 a.m. in the morning, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And the coach that you trust to give you the right programs and put your body on the line to get everything out of it to achieve your goals. And you sort of trust, whether it's nutritionists or coaches, and in the working world, it's mentors or, your boss. You sort of have to put a level of trust in them that they're taking you in the right direction and the end goal for everybody.
Yeah. So I know mentorship is a big part of your program. We get into these discussions, we talk about what it means to be a good mentor,
Mhm.
but we also want to describe what it means to be a good mentee. Are there some mentor habits that you've seen are best among the mentors you offer into your program? What are some of the things that the best mentors do?
Unequivocally, it's opening the doors that you can't open yourself, inviting you into rooms that you might not yet be in, and giving you the space, the airtime, whether it's to speak yourself or mentioning you and the work that you're doing in their own conversations, for me has been the most valuable throughout my career. And in the mentors that we work with is certainly what I see equate to high levels of success. I can really give the visibility to the athlete while still providing sort of coverage and a safe environment, but getting them in the rooms and on the minds of other people at senior levels is really, really important.
And then from the mentee aspect, how are you coaching the athletes to get the most from this experience?
It's interesting because a good mentee really drives the ship. The mentor obviously has their part to play and they really are critical, but mentoring doesn't happen to you.
Hmm.
You don't sit back in the chair and go, mentor me. You have to be extremely proactive, taking ideas to the discussions you have with your mentor, asking insightful questions, really sort of sitting back and working on how to articulate where you want to be, what you're trying to achieve, what questions you have and need answered. It's definitely a very active process for the mentee. And I say that to all of our athletes, even the ones that have joined EY. I try and connect them to other athletes within the firm for more informal mentoring, but they need to be the one out front.
Yeah, it's so crazy when you get into those relationships or you get into those conversations and the mentee walks in thinking, okay, what do you have for me today?
I know.
That's not good.
No.
So you've mentioned that you've had several different classes, 6 of them that have made it through. Is there one particular example of someone who captivated you and inspired you to watch their growth during their time in your program?
If I had to put a name on it, Kim Brennan, who was, I think maybe she was our second class in 2016. This is front of mind for me and crosses into the EY realm too. She's a 3-time Olympic rower, multiple medalist, gold in Rio, was a part of our mentoring program during the Olympic year, which just goes to show how great at multitasking she is. Ended up joining EY in Australia after the Rio Olympics. Very short, 5 years, and anyone who knows professional services knows this is exceptional. Kim got announced as an addition to the partnership in Australia last week.
Wow.
She's a superstar in general, but that has probably been one of the most outstanding kind of movements through the firm and making partner that I've seen. And she deserves everything that's coming to her. But all 130 of them are absolutely amazing. And it's been impressive to watch the journeys. We've had people run for public office, we've had people start their own business and take it across borders as well. We've had people change careers and move countries because of the relationships that they've built with this program. And that's really inspiring to me.
So, one of the things that came up in an earlier discussion was how many of these young men and women who have experienced athletics also lost out on internships and other opportunities
Yes.
that might have put other people ahead of them. You might be really impressed by what this person did in a crew situation, but they, in fact, didn't show up in all these internships. So, you're trying to help give the athlete the leg that they lost.
Yeah, you're right. The resumes look a little bit different. It's an interesting shift in diverse recruiting at this point in time and the diverse talent conversation in general, that whether you're an athlete or you've been in the military, there's a whole host of reasons why you might not have a traditional looking resume. Being able to see through that in terms of what do you bring? Okay, so you didn't do the 3 internships in college and have 3 years of experience straight out of college in your CPA, but you went to 2 different Olympic Games. So, in a way, It's resilience, this level of inbuilt confidence, knowing how to put a high-performing team together and being able to overcome obstacles, to quote Beth, taking the failure as feedback and bouncing back. It's educating business, which is the flip side of this coin. We speak a lot about how do we help the athletes, but there is a really important piece of the discussion in talking to business about what does a diverse candidate pipeline look like? And obviously, I'm championing for the athletes pipeline and knowing the skill sets that they bring. It's really interesting seeing some of the resumes being glossed over because the sport isn't being as valued as maybe it should be. There's a level of experience that an athlete brings within those realms that is really important in business and often overlooked. Pulling high performing teams together is not an easy thing.
No. And in fact, when I listen to you and I'm thinking about all the different people we've had that have been really thought provoking to me,
Mhm.
we had a woman named Kate Johnson on episode 41, the Google marketing executive.
Yes.
Incredible. But she talked about how athletics taught her the importance of incremental goals and how she uses that every day in everything that she does. And I just thought, she's extraordinary at every level. But on top of that, that she brought athletics out and is able to teach that to other people. Really incredible.
Oh, yes. Incremental goals. You don't just look for the big wins, you look for the small milestones. That is so important. And definitely within business, you've got a long term career. So you're not experiencing those big wins every day, but you have your eye on the prize. But you also, I believe, in my career at least, you try and celebrate those small milestones as well.
You have to. Absolutely. So you referenced what athletes bring to you as far as building a team,
Yeah.
understanding what it takes to have everyone contribute something and often different things for the betterment of the greater good. But the word team is often overused, right?
Yeah.
Truth is, most of those are not really teams. They're
Yes.
just people that came together because they got hired together.
Yes.
You've been around great teams. You've experienced, you and Anatole, great team, right? If you had to think of some of the elements that allow a group of individual actors to ultimately bond together and become a great team, what are some of the elements of that bridge?
At EY, high performing teams is so central to what we do and what we build. First off, there's a level of being able to collaborate and being really open and willing to share your experiences, to share your insights, but also to listen to the people around you. I think collaboration is certainly the first thing that comes to mind. And I think there's a shared vision. If you have sort of a collection of people that maybe there's thematically some consistencies between them, but they're not technically a team. They all have their own idea of what success looks like.
Yep.
So I think a team really needs a well articulated shared vision. But maybe the more important side of things is wanting success for everybody on the team, not just for you.
Mm.
So, showing a level of concern for other people's success is a really interesting one because if someone is struggling, a really good leader will step aside and help pave the way to bring them back into the circle because their success means the team's success.
You had a small nugget right there when you were talking about collaboration. You talked about the importance of listening.
Yes.
Listening is such a lost art. People listen to respond, not to gain information. Are there ways that you help others learn to listen better?
That's actually a really interesting question. I don't know if I've specifically thought about that before. Giving them feedback. If you're in a meeting and people are really quick to respond, you can tell that they've been thinking about that answer while the person is still finishing their sentence. Take a beat. This isn't a sprint. We need to sort of sit back, think a little bit more about what your response is and how that pushes the discussion forward. And it's not just about having your voice heard, which I'm very grateful for because it works on the opposite side for me. But you're absolutely right. Really listening to people and responding to what they say, not to what you think they are saying, is really important. And that's where having a little bit of silence isn't a bad thing.
That's what you said.
Absolutely. Because it really means people are thinking about it.
Don't look at it as a bad thing. And I love this. Take a beat.
Yeah.
I've never quite heard it said that way.
That might be an Aussie thing.
I was going to
Sorry.
give it to you as an Aussie thing and say, good, I'm better today because I have an Aussie thing in my vocabulary.
Absolutely. Use it, all yours.
Kristy, I cannot thank you enough,
No.
For the research you're doing, the outreach you're doing, the efforts you're making, and the time you spent today being a corporate competitor. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Don. This has been a great conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours, and giving us and the research that EY has been doing, the airtime is so valuable to us, and we love adding more and more people to the village. We know that it takes. And obviously being an Olympic year, we've got some exciting new research coming up and more athletes to be hired. So it's been wonderful being here today.
Many of us, not just athletes, have had to reinvent ourselves professionally from time to time. This conversation reminded me of a challenging transition in my own career. After 12 years with Sports Illustrated, I retired, and I will admit it took me more than a year to change my voicemail, which said, "This is Don Yeager from Sports Illustrated." I was so connected to the position that it was difficult to let those words go. Kristy Ingram is right. When your descriptor changes, it's important to remember and think about why you love that role and make that passion your new descriptor. Even if that is not the season you are in right now, spend some time today thinking about this, because when change inevitably comes, you will be a stronger corporate competitor. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How are
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.